The medical chamber aboard the Talvers smelled of metal and blood. Commander Vector stood perfectly still, his massive frame casting shadows across the sterile walls. His scales, dark as space itself, gleamed under the harsh lights. He was a warrior of the Crithian Empire, decorated with scars from 100 battles. Today, he waited for something more terrifying than any war. His offspring was being born. The medical officer, a smaller Crithian named Tekmal, worked quickly. Crithian births were brutal affairs, and weakness was culled early. That was the way. That had always been the way. Vector's claws scraped against the metal floor as he waited. He had survived the trial of blades. He had led fleets to victory. Surely his child would be strong. The infant's first cry was wrong. Too soft, too weak. Tekmal lifted the newborn with clinical efficiency. The child was small, barely half the size it should be. Its scales were pale, almost translucent in places. When it tried to grip Tekmal's finger, its claws barely made an impression. The medical officer's face showed nothing, but his silence said everything. "Commander," Tekmal said carefully. "The child lives, but—" Vector stepped forward. He looked down at his offspring and felt something crack inside his chest. The child looked up at him with eyes too large for its face. It made a small sound, reaching toward him. But Vector saw what every Crithian would see. Weakness, defect, shame. The bloodline assessment? Vector's voice was steady. It had to be. Tekmal activated his scanner. Numbers appeared in the air, each one a judgment. Bone density, 40% below standard. Scale hardness, inadequate. Muscle development, severely lacking. Predicted adult size, well below acceptable range. Unfit for the bloodline, Tekmal declared. It was not cruelty. It was simply fact. By law and tradition, Commander, you know what must be done. Vector did know. The Crithian Empire had ruled the stars for 10,000 years because they were strong. The weak were abandoned. They died or they survived on their own merit. There were no exceptions, not even for the child of a commander. He reached down and took the infant in his massive hands. The child was so small, so fragile. It looked at him with complete trust, not knowing what was about to happen. Vector's heart, trained to feel nothing, betrayed him with a single moment of pain. "Prepare an escape pod," he said. "Standard abandonment protocol." The pod was small, designed for this exact purpose. Vector placed the child inside with enough supplies for 3 days. The pod's navigation system would find a habitable world. After that, fate would decide. He keyed in the launch sequence, his fingers moving with mechanical precision. The child made that soft sound again. Vector closed the pod without looking back. He could not afford to look back. The pod launched into the void. Vector stood at the viewport and watched it disappear among the stars. Somewhere behind him, Tekmal was already erasing the birth records. The child would not exist in official files. It would be forgotten. Vector returned to his quarters and did what every Crithian warrior did. He moved forward. He forgot. Or at least, he tried. The pod traveled for 2 days before its sensors detected a world. Myrinae 7, a frontier colony on the edge of human space. The automated systems guided it down through the atmosphere. The landing was rough, crashing through the canopy of forest before slamming into soft earth. Park Deho was inspecting the southern perimeter when he heard the crash. He was the colony director, a practical man in his 50s with gray in his hair and experience in his eyes. He had seen many things in his years on Myrinae 7, but nothing like the smoking pod half buried in the ground. "Get Choi Yuna," he said into his communicator. "And Han Ji-woo, we have a situation." The pod door had cracked open in the impact. Inside, surrounded by blinking lights and cushioning foam, was a creature. Park Daeho had seen enough alien species to recognize a Krithian, but this one was small, young, and making sounds that sounded disturbingly like crying. Choi Yuna arrived first. She was the colony's medical officer, a woman who had seen too much suffering to ignore any more. She took one look at the injured alien child, and her decision was instant. "We're taking it back to medical," she said, already preparing her emergency kit. Han Ji-woo, the security chief, arrived with his rifle ready. He was a careful man, trained to see threats everywhere. "That's a Krithian," he said. "You know what they do to human colonies." "It's a baby," Yuna said flatly. "Help me, or get out of the way." They carried the child back to the colony. By the time they arrived, word had spread. People gathered, arguing in heated voices. The Krithians were predators, conquerors. Helping one of them could bring disaster. Others argued that leaving a child to die was not who they were. Park Daeho called for a vote. It was close. But in the end, humanity's better nature won by a margin of 7 votes. The child stayed. Yuna worked through the night, treating injuries and malnutrition. The child was stable by morning, sleeping in a medical bed that was far too large. Daeho stood watch, thinking about the implications of what they had done. Kim Tae-yang found the alien child by accident. He was 12 years old, still raw from losing his mother 6 months ago. He had wandered into medical during one of his restless nights and saw the creature in the bed. It was awake, looking around with wide, frightened eyes. Tae-yang approached slowly. The child watched him, scales rippling with fear. But Tae-yang had learned something about fear. His mother had taught him before she died. Fear was just loneliness wearing a different face. "Hey," Tae-yang said softly. "It's okay. You're safe here." The alien child tilted its head. Tae-yang sat down beside the bed and started talking. He talked about his mother, about the colony, about the stars. He did not know if the creature understood, but it stopped shaking. Over the next few days, Tae-yang spent every free moment with the alien. He brought it food and learned what it could eat. He made simple sounds and waited for responses. And slowly, incredibly, the child started to mimic him. "Rah," the child said one morning, struggling with the unfamiliar sounds. Tae-yang grinned. "Raiden," he said, naming the child after a storm he had once seen. "Your name is Raiden." The child repeated it, clumsy but determined. Raiden. The colony held another meeting. They could not keep calling it the creature or the alien. Names had power. Names meant belonging. They voted to accept the name Tae-yang had given. Raiden learned his second word 2 weeks later. Tae-yang had been teaching him Korean, simple words and gestures. One evening, Raiden pointed at Tae-yang and said, very carefully, "Hyung, older brother." Tae-yang felt tears in his eyes. He had lost his mother, but somehow, in the strangest way possible, he had found a brother. The colony adapted. Lee Bora, the chief engineer, designed special equipment scaled for Raiden's smaller size. Kang Minho, who ran the agriculture dome, showed Raiden how to plant seeds. Han Ji-woo, who had been the most skeptical, began teaching the young alien basic self-defense. Not because he thought Raiden would threaten him, but because he saw how the other children sometimes teased the strange creature who looked so different. Raiden grew, but he grew wrong by Krithian standards. He remained small, his scale soft, his strength less than it should be. By Krithian law, he would have been eliminated long ago. But here, among humans, different rules applied. Here, weakness was not a death sentence. It was simply a challenge to overcome. And Raiden, without knowing it, was learning to overcome challenges in ways no Krithian had ever imagined. 5 years passed on Myrinae 7, and Raiden grew in ways that confused everyone who knew what Crithians were supposed to be. At an age when he should have stood 7 feet tall and been undergoing combat trials, he barely reached 5.5 feet. His scales, which should have been like armor, remained soft enough that rough handling could bruise them. His claws, meant to rend metal, could barely scratch wood. But he was alive. And more than that, he was happy. Taiyang, now 17, had become more than a brother to Raiden. He was a teacher, a friend, and a constant presence. They worked together in the engineering bay, where Lee Bora had taken both of them under her wing. She was a woman in her 40s with grease-stained hands and a mind that could solve any problem given enough time. "Hand me the torque wrench," Bora said, her head buried in the guts of a water purifier. Raiden passed her the tool without looking. 5 years of working together had created an easy rhythm. His Crithian eyesight, sharper than human vision, helped spot problems in dim spaces. His smaller hands could reach places Bora's could not. "You see the misalignment?" Bora asked, her voice muffled. "Yes," Raiden said. His Korean was perfect now, though his voice still carried a slight rasp that marked him as non-human. "The third coupling is 0.7 degrees off-center. Fix it." Raiden's hands moved with precision. This was what he had learned from humans. Not how to be stronger, but how to be smarter. How to use tools and leverage instead of raw power. How to think through problems instead of smashing through them. Taiyang watched with a smile. His brother had come so far from that frightened child in the medical bay. But he also saw the shadows that sometimes crossed Raiden's face. The moments when other Crithians appeared on news broadcasts, massive and terrifying, and Raiden would unconsciously compare himself. Later that day, they joined Kan Minho in the agriculture dome. The old farmer was patient and kind, teaching them about growth cycles and soil composition. Raiden had a natural affinity for this work. His Crithian senses could detect subtle changes in plant health that humans missed. "This one is sick," Raiden said, touching a young tomato plant. Minho examined it and nodded. "Good eye. What do you think it needs?" "More nitrogen. And the roots are compacted. It needs to be transplanted, then transplanted." Raiden worked carefully, his movements gentle despite his predator heritage. Minho watched and saw what many humans had come to see. Raiden was not weak. He was different, and different had its own kind of strength. The combat training with Han Ji-woo was harder. The security chief had softened toward Raiden over the years, but he remained practical. The galaxy was dangerous, and Raiden needed to be able to defend himself. "Again," Ji-woo said, circling on the training mat. Raiden was breathing hard. They had been at this for an hour. Ji-woo was not a large man by human standards, but he was skilled. And every time Raiden tried to use brute force, he failed. "You are thinking like a Crithian," Ji-woo said. "Stop it." "I am Crithian," Raiden said, frustrated. "No, you are you. Now think." "I am bigger than you, stronger than you. How do you win?" Raiden's instincts screamed at him to attack, to dominate, to prove his strength. But 5 years with humans had taught him to question his instincts. He took a breath and looked at the situation differently. When Ji-woo attacked again, Raiden did not try to block the force. He redirected it, using Ji-woo's own momentum to send him stumbling. Before the security chief could recover, Raiden had moved behind him and tapped him on the shoulder. "Like that?" Raiden asked. Ji-woo grinned. "Exactly like that. But not everything was training and work." Raiden had friends among the colony children. They played games together, explored the forests, and shared stories. To them, Raiden was just Raiden. Not a Crithian, not an alien, just their friend who happened to have scales and sharp teeth. It was during one of these explorations that things went wrong. Raiden and Taiyang were with a group of younger children, mapping a new section of forest when the screaming started. Native predators, called razor stalkers, had cornered 3 of the children near a ravine. The creatures were vicious, all teeth and claws, hunting in a pack of 6. Raiden's instincts exploded. These were predators. He was a predator. This was what he was born for. He started forward, claws extending, ready to fight. Taiyang grabbed his arm. Wait. Think. They will die. Not if we are smart. Taiyang's voice was calm, cutting through the panic. Look at the situation. Really look. Raiden forced himself to stop, to observe. The razor stalkers were focused on the children, who had climbed onto a fallen log. The creatures circled, but did not attack. They were testing, probing for weakness. They hunt by fear, Raiden said slowly, his mind processing. They wait for prey to run, right? And they have sensitive hearing. Raiden looked at Taiyang. We could use the sonic emitters from the perimeter fence. They worked fast. Taiyang sprinted back to grab portable emitters while Raiden kept the razor stalker's attention, making noise and throwing rocks. When Taiyang returned, they set up the devices in a triangle around the children and activated them. The high-frequency sound was inaudible to humans, but agony to the razor stalkers. The creatures fled, disappearing into the forest within seconds. The children were safe. No blood had been spilled. No creature had died. It was not the Crithian way, but it was the human way, and it had worked. That night, as the colony celebrated the children's safe return, Raiden sat alone on the observation deck. Choi Yuna found him there, staring at the stars. You did well today, she said, sitting beside him. I wanted to fight them, Raiden admitted. Every part of me wanted to attack, but you did not. No, I thought instead. Like a human? He looked at his hands. Is that wrong? Should I be more like my own kind? Yuna was quiet for a moment. She had patched Raiden's wounds more times than she could count. She had watched him grow from a terrified infant to this thoughtful young person. She chose her words carefully. Your kind abandoned you because you were different, she said. We kept you because you were different. Being Crithian or human does not matter. Being yourself matters. But what am I? Someone who saves children with his mind instead of his claws. That seems pretty good to me. Raiden smiled slightly. But the question remained, lurking in the back of his mind. What was he? Not Crithian enough for his own species. Not human enough to truly belong. Something in between. Later that week, he was helping Bora with the communication systems when he accidentally intercepted a Crithian military broadcast. The language was one he had learned from old databases, though he had never heard it spoken by another of his kind. The voice was deep, authoritative, and familiar in a way that made his scales ripple. Supreme Admiral Vector was addressing the fleet. There was talk of expansion, of conquest, of human space being the next target. Raiden listened and felt something cold settle in his stomach. The voice spoke of strength and purity, of the weak being unworthy, of humans being soft prey, easy to crush. He said nothing to Bora. He saved the transmission and listened to it late at night, trying to understand the alien thoughts of his own species. The Supreme Admiral, whoever he was, believed that might made right. That strength was the only virtue. That cooperation was weakness and compassion was a flaw. Raiden thought about Taiyang teaching him patience, about Bora showing him how to solve problems, about Minho's quiet lessons in growth and care, about Jiwoo's disciplined strength, about Yuna's healing hands. If that was weakness, then he was proud to be weak. But he also knew, with growing certainty, the two philosophies would eventually collide. The Crithian way and the human way could not coexist forever. Somewhere, sometime, they would meet. And when they did, Raiden would have to choose which side he stood on. Or, Perhaps, he thought, looking at his reflection in the dark window, he would have to create a third option. Something neither fully Crithian nor fully human. Something new. The Crithian ship appeared in Mariner 7's orbit without warning. It was not a warship, but a diplomatic vessel, which somehow made it more frightening. Warships you could understand. Diplomacy from the Crithian Empire usually meant demands with teeth behind them. Park. Deho stood in the colony's command center, watching the massive vessel blot out stars. He was tired. 58 years old, and every one of those years felt heavy today. Beside him, Han Ji-woo checked weapon systems that would be useless against a ship that size. They are requesting permission to send a shuttle, the communications officer said. Do we have a choice? Deho asked. No, sir. Then tell them they have permission. And get everyone to the central square. All civilians inside buildings. The shuttle landed with precision that spoke of military training. When the door opened, the figure that emerged made several colonists gasp. War Mistress Shalcora was 8.5 feet tall, her scales the color of dried blood. She wore armor that had seen actual combat, and her eyes swept across the gathered humans with barely concealed contempt. She had brought 4 guards, each nearly as large as she was. They stood in formation, a clear display of power. Deho stepped forward, hiding his fear behind decades of diplomatic experience. Welcome to Mariner 7. I am Director Park Deho. Shalcora looked down at him like he was an insect. You will provide tribute. Food supplies, metals, technology. The Crithian Empire offers protection in exchange for these resources. Protection from what? From the Crithian Empire. Shalcora's smile showed too many teeth. You have 3 days to compile the tribute. We will return for it. That was when Raiden stepped out from behind Deho. He had been hiding, knowing that his presence might complicate things. But hearing Shalcora's voice, hearing that casual cruelty, something in him snapped. He walked forward, and for the first time in his life, he stood before another Crithian. Shalcora's eyes widened. Then they narrowed. She approached Raiden slowly, circling him like a predator examining wounded prey. She said something in the Crithian language. Harsh and guttural Raiden answered in the same language. His accent rough from lack of use, the colonists could not understand the words. But they understood the tone. Disgust, anger, contempt. Shalcora switched back to Korean, speaking for the benefit of the humans. This is what you keep as a pet? A defect? A shame to our species? She looked at Raiden with something like pity. You should have died. That would have been kinder. I did not die, Raiden said quietly. I lived. They saved me. They made you weak. They made me strong. Shalcora laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. You think yourself strong? You, who would have been cold in your first trial. You, who are barely worthy of the name Crithian. Taiyang stepped forward, his face red with anger. He's worth 10 of you. Shalcora glanced at the human teenager and dismissed him immediately. But then an idea seemed to form in her eyes. She smiled again, and this time it was truly frightening. A challenge then, she said. Let your pet fight me. Ritual combat, by our laws. If he wins, we leave your system in peace. If I win, you provide tribute, and he comes with us to face judgment for the dishonor of living. No, Deho said immediately. Raiden, you do not have to do this. But Raiden was looking at Shalcora, and in her eyes he saw everything he had feared about his own species. Cruelty, pride, strength without purpose. If he did not fight, the colony would suffer. They had saved him. They had raised him. They had given him a life when his own kind had thrown him away. I accept, Raiden said. The next 3 days were a blur. The entire colony mobilized to help. Lee Bora analyzed recordings of Crithian combat, looking for patterns and weaknesses. Han Jiwoo drilled Raiden in every technique he knew, focusing on speed and precision over power. Choi Yuna worked to enhance Raiden's endurance, knowing he would need every advantage. Taeyang barely left Raiden's side. They talked late into the nights, brothers facing an impossible challenge together. "You cannot beat her with strength," Taeyang said. "So we changed the game. How? By being you. Not a weak Krithian. Not a fake human. Just you." The day of the combat arrived. Shalkora stood in the center of the square, looking relaxed and confident. She had removed her armor, fighting in only basic clothing. Even without protection, she was terrifying. Muscle and scale, a living weapon. Raiden faced her, and he looked like a child in comparison. He stood barely over 5.5 feet. His scales were pale. His frame was light. Every instinct screamed that this was suicide. The rules were simple. Fight until one could not continue. No weapons. No outside interference. Victory through dominance or submission. Shalkora attacked first. She was fast, impossibly fast for something so large. Her claws raked across Raiden's shoulder, drawing first blood before he could even react. The crowd gasped. Raiden stumbled back, pain exploding through his arm. Shalkora pressed the advantage. She fought like every Krithian fought, with overwhelming aggression and power. Each blow was meant to maim, to break, to destroy. Raiden tried to defend, but it was like standing before a storm. Within 2 minutes, he was bleeding from a dozen cuts. His left arm hung uselessly. His ribs were cracked. The humans watching felt despair settle over them like a shroud. Shalkora grabbed Raiden by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "Submit," she hissed. "Die with at least that much dignity." Raiden looked into her eyes. And then he did something no Krithian had ever done in ritual combat. He spoke to her. "Why?" he asked, blood on his lips. "Why does it have to be this way? What?" Shalkora's grip loosened slightly in confusion. "You are strong. I know that. But why is strength the only thing that matters? Why must we destroy instead of build? Dominate instead of cooperate? That is the way. That is our law. But who made that law? Who decided that the weak must die? What if they are only weak in one way but strong in others?" Shalkora threw him to the ground. "Enough talking. Fight or die." Raiden stood up slowly. His body screamed in protest, but his mind was clear. He stopped thinking like a Krithian. He stopped trying to match her strength. He thought like a human, like an engineer, like a strategist. When Shalkora charged again, Raiden did not try to block. He moved aside, using minimal energy. Her momentum carried her past him. He used the environment, the post that marked the combat area, the uneven ground. He made her chase him, expending energy while he conserved, that he talked while he moved. They teach their children here, not to fight but to think, not to conquer but to understand. Is that really weakness? Silence. But Raiden did not silence. He spoke of Taeyang's loyalty, of Bora's intelligence, of Menho's patience, of Yuna's compassion, of Jiwoo's disciplined strength. He spoke of a colony that had taken a dying alien child and made him family. Shalkora was growing frustrated. This was not how combat worked. There should be no talking, no philosophy, only the pure test of strength. But Raiden's words were like seeds, finding cracks and certainties she had never questioned. Then Raiden changed tactics. He stopped running. He used the techniques Jiwoo had taught him, movements that relied on leverage and precision. When Shalkora overextended on a strike, he caught her arm and used a pressure point technique to make her fingers spasm. When she tried to grab him again, he redirected her force and sent her stumbling into a post. Not enough to truly hurt her, but enough to surprise her. For the first time, doubt appeared in Shalkora's eyes. The fight continued, but it had changed. Raiden was still outmatched in power, but he was thinking faster, moving smarter. And he was making Shalkora question everything she thought she knew about strength. Finally, Shalkora made a mistake. Enraged and confused, she committed fully to a killing blow, putting all her strength into a strike meant to end the fight. Raiden saw it coming. He had been waiting for a dot. He moved aside at the last possible second. Her claws passed where his throat had been, and her momentum left her completely exposed. Raiden struck with every technique he had learned, combining Krithian instinct with human precision. He hit the nerve clusters Bora had mapped from Krithian anatomy. He used the joint locks Jiwoo had drilled into Dot, and then, impossibly, Shalkora was on the ground. Raid and stood over her, breathing hard. She was disoriented, her body betraying her from the precise strikes. He could finish this. Krithian law demanded he finish this. One killing blow, and it would be over. Instead, he extended his hand. "You fought well," he said. "But you lost. Not because you were weak. Because you could not imagine a different kind of strength." Shalkora stared at his hand like it was a weapon. "You mock me." "No, I honor you. You are a warrior. But there are other ways to be strong." The square was utterly silent. Shalkora looked at Raiden's hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, she took it. He helped her to her feet. "You won," she said. "I will honor our agreement." We leave. As her shuttle prepared to depart, Shalkora approached Raiden one final time. She spoke in Krithian, low enough that only he could hear. "The Supreme Admiral will learn of this. Of you. He will come. Let him," Raiden said. "You do not understand. He is not like me. He will not offer you a duel. He will simply destroy everything you love." "Who is he?" Shalkora looked at Raiden with something almost like sympathy. "The one who abandoned you. Your father." The word father hung in the air between Raiden and Shalkora like a blade. Raiden felt something cold spread through his chest. He had known, abstractly, that someone had placed him in that escape pod, but he had never allowed himself to think about who or why. Now the truth stood before him, and it was worse than any nightmare. Shalkora saw the recognition in his eyes. "Vector, Supreme Admiral of the Northern Fleet, the warrior who has never lost a battle. That is who abandoned you because you were weak. And that is who will come for you now." She boarded her shuttle without another word. Within hours, the Krithian ship vanished from orbit. Raiden told the others everything. They gathered in Daeho's office, the people who had become his true family. Taiyang sat beside him, a constant presence. Bora was already pulling up everything she could find on Krithian fleet movements. Jiwo studied tactical reports with a grim expression. Yuna simply held Raiden's hand, saying nothing but offering everything. "We have maybe 6 months," Daeho said. "Shalkora will report back. Vector will plan. Then he will come." "We should evacuate," Jiwoo said. "Get everyone off-world. Where would we go?" Bora asked. "This is our home. Besides, if Vector is coming for Raiden, he will follow wherever we go." All eyes turned to Raiden. He sat very still, processing information that threatened to overwhelm him. His father, the Supreme Admiral, the one who had thrown him away like garbage, was now coming to finish what he had started. "This is my fault," Raiden said quietly. "I should leave. Draw him away." "No." Taiyang's voice was sharp. "We are not doing that. He is coming because of me. Because I embarrassed him by surviving. By being raised by humans. If I leave, he wins," Daeho interrupted. "He makes you run, makes you hide, makes you ashamed of what you are. Is that what you want?" Raiden looked at the man who had been more of a father to him than Vector ever was. I do not want any of you to die because of me. Then we make sure nobody dies, Bora said. She activated a hologram showing the Mirina 7 system. We have 6 months. We use them. Those 6 months became a blur of preparation. The colony transformed. Bora designed new defensive systems, combining human innovation with what they knew of Krithian technology. Jiwoo trained everyone who could hold a weapon, not to attack but to defend and evacuate if necessary. They sent messages to nearby human colonies, warning them of the potential threat. Some sent supplies. Others sent volunteers. Word of the Krithian raised by humans had spread, and many wanted to stand with Mirina 7. Raiden worked harder than anyone. He studied Krithian military tactics, trying to think like the father he had never known. He practiced combat until his body could not move. He learned to pilot, to shoot, to plan. But more than that, he learned about his father. Vector was a legend among the Krithians. He had risen from a simple warrior to Supreme Admiral through pure skill and ruthless efficiency. He had never shown mercy. He had never retreated. He had never acknowledged weakness in any form. And he had abandoned his own child for being imperfect. What kind of person does that? Raiden asked one night, sitting with Taiyang on the observation deck. A broken one, Taiyang said. Someone who never learned what we learned, which is, that strength is not about being perfect. It is about getting back up when you fall. You have done that every day of your life. The Krithian fleet arrived early. Not 6 months, but 5. 20 warships emerged from hyperspace, led by the massive flagship Talvaros. They did not bother with diplomacy. They simply established a blockade around the planet. Daeho received the transmission in the command center. The face on the screen was older than in the files, scarred and hard. But the eyes were the same as Raiden's. Vector looked exactly like his son might have looked if he had grown properly. I am Supreme Admiral Vector of the Krithian Empire. You harbor an abomination, a failed creature that should have died. Surrender it, and you may live as tributaries. Resist, and you will be eliminated. Daeho kept his voice steady. The person you are talking about is a citizen of this colony. We do not surrender our people. Then you choose death. The transmission ended. Raiden stood beside Daeho, having heard everything. I have to go up there. That is suicide. He wants me. Let me face him. Maybe I can convince him to leave you alone. And if you cannot, then at least I tried. Raiden looked at Daeho with eyes full of a sorrow too deep for words. You saved me when I should have died. You gave me a life. Let me save you now. Daeho wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in Raiden's eyes and knew that some things could not be argued against. You will not go alone, which was how Raiden, Taiyang, Choi Yuna, and Han Jiwoo ended up in a small shuttle, heading toward the Krithian flagship. Bora had designed a risky maneuver that would let them slip through the blockade. It worked, but barely. The Talvaros allowed them to dock. They were expected. Krithian warriors escorted them through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. Everything was too large, too sharp, too aggressive. They were brought to the command chamber, a vast space dominated by tactical displays and the massive throne where Vector sat. Raiden had prepared himself for this moment, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of standing before his father. Vector was everything Raiden was not. Massive, powerful, perfect by Krithian standards. He looked at Raiden with an expression of pure disgust. So, Vector said in Krithian, "The defect lives." "I live," Raiden replied in the same language. "And I am not a defect. You are an embarrassment, a stain on my honor. I should have ensured you died, but I was weak. I showed mercy. That was my mistake. Mercy is not weakness. Vector stood, his full height making Raiden look like a child. You have been corrupted by these soft creatures. You speak their language. You follow their weak philosophies. You are more human than Crithian now. Yes, Raiden said simply. And I am better for it. The command chamber went silent. Crithian warriors stared in shock. No one spoke to the Supreme Admiral that way. Vector's claws extended. You dare. I dare because I am not afraid of you anymore. I was raised by people who taught me that strength comes in many forms. That cooperation is better than domination. That compassion is not weakness but the highest form of courage. Enough. Vector's voice could have shattered steel. I will give you one chance. Ritual combat. You and me. If you win, I withdraw the fleet. If I win, I destroy everything you love and leave you alive to witness it. Accepted. Taiyang grabbed Raiden's arm. You cannot beat him. I know. Then why? Because I have to try. Raiden looked at his human brother, his human family, and smiled. You taught me that. The combat arena was cleared. Vector removed his armor, revealing a body that was a masterwork of Crithian evolution. Scars covered him like medals, each one a story of survival and victory. Raiden stood across from him, small and fragile in comparison. Last chance, Vector said. Submit now. Acknowledge your weakness. I will make your death quick. I am not weak, Raiden said. I am different. And different is not the same as weak. Vector attacked with the fury of a warrior who had never been challenged. He was faster than Shalkora, stronger, more skilled. His first strike broke 2 of Raiden's ribs. The second nearly took his head off. Raiden fought back with everything he had learned. Every technique from Ji-Woo, every strategy from Bora, every ounce of determination from 5 years of proving he deserved to live. It was not enough. Vector was simply too powerful. Within minutes, Raiden was on the ground, bleeding from dozens of wounds. His left arm was broken. His vision was blurring. Vector stood over him. Pathetic. I was right to abandon you. From the sidelines, Taiyang was shouting. Yuna was crying. Jiao's face was stone, but his hands were clenched into fists. Raiden looked up at his father through blood and pain. And he asked the question that had haunted him for 5 years. Why did you not help me? Vector paused. What? I was your child. I was small and weak, yes. But I was your child. Why did you not try to help me grow? Why did you not teach me? Why was abandonment your first choice? Because you were defective. The law is wrong. Raiden pulled himself to his knees. I was weak when I was born, but I got stronger. Not in the way you value, but I got stronger. They helped me. Why could you not have done the same? Vector's expression was unreadable. It is not our way. Then your way's broken. Raiden stood up, swaying. His body was failing, but his mind was clear. He looked at his father and saw not a monster, but a victim of a cruel system that valued only one kind of strength. You could have been my father, Raiden said. Instead, you were a coward who threw away his child rather than face the challenge of raising someone different. Vector roared and attacked with killing intent. But rage made him sloppy. Raiden, despite his injuries, saw the opening. He used every last bit of strength to execute a perfect counter, the way Ji-Woo had taught him. Vector crashed to the ground. Raiden collapsed beside him, unable to continue. They lay there, father and son, both defeated in different ways. The arena was silent. No one knew what to do. Then Vector spoke, his voice quiet. You won. No, Raiden said. We both lost. But we do not have to keep losing. Vector stood slowly, his movements careful. He had been defeated, but not in the way he had expected. His body was fine, barely injured. But something inside him felt broken, or perhaps finally beginning to heal. "By our law, you won," Vector said. "I will withdraw the fleet." "That is not enough," Raiden said from the floor, where Yuna was already working on his injuries. "The law that made you abandon me, that forces strength through cruelty, that law needs to change. One warrior cannot change the Empire. Then be more than one warrior. Be a father. Be someone who admits he was wrong." Vector looked at his son, really looked at him, for the first time. He saw the scars from 5 years of surviving against all odds. He saw the humans who stood around Raiden like a shield, ready to die for him. He saw something he had never seen before, a different kind of family, a different kind of strength. "I was taught that mercy was weakness," Vector said quietly. "That to show compassion was to invite death. I believed it so completely that I threw away my own child." "You did," Raiden said. "But you can choose differently now." The Supreme Admiral was silent for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked every Krithian in the chamber. He knelt beside his son. "I cannot undo what I did," Vector said. "But I can honor your victory. The fleet will withdraw, and I will send a message to the Empire. They need to see this, to see what happened here. What will you tell them? The truth, that I was defeated by the son I abandoned, that he was raised by humans who taught him a strength I never understood, that perhaps our way is not the only way." Vector stood and gave orders. The fleet would withdraw immediately. More than that, he declared Myrinae 7 under his personal protection. Any Krithian who threatened the colony would answer to him. Before he left, Vector approached Raiden one final time. "I am not asking to be your father. I know I have no right to that. But I would like to know who you became." "My name is Raiden," Raiden said, "and my family is here. But perhaps someday we can talk." It was not forgiveness, but it was a beginning. The months that followed changed everything. Word spread across the galaxy about the Krithian raised by humans. The story became legend, the weak child who survived through a different kind of strength. Other species began to question the Krithian philosophy of brutal dominance. Refugees started arriving at Myrinae 7, outcasts and failures by their own culture's standards. Each one found acceptance, purpose, and a chance to prove that different did not mean weak. The colony expanded rapidly. Lee Bora designed new habitats that could accommodate multiple species. Cam Minho's agriculture dome grew to feed hundreds. Park Daeho, officially still director, became something more like a mayor of a growing city. Raiden and Tai Yang founded the Frontier Guard, an organization dedicated to protecting colonies like theirs. They recruited from multiple species, teaching a hybrid combat style that combined the best techniques from each culture. Krithian strength, human strategy, and the unique abilities of dozens of other species. Bora became the head of engineering, designing ships that were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. They combined Krithian durability with human innovation and alien technologies. The first ship off the line was called Different, and it became the flagship of the Frontier Guard. Jiwoo trained the Guard's soldiers, teaching them that discipline and technique could overcome raw power. He personally trained each recruit, demanding excellence but also compassion. His students were taught when to fight and, more importantly, when not to. Choi Yuna established a medical center that treated all species equally. She pioneered techniques for cross-species medicine, studying how different biologies could learn from each other. She saved hundreds of lives and trained the next generation of healers. But not everything was peaceful. The Krithian Empire was vast, and change came slowly. There were Krithians who saw Raiden as a traitor, a corruption of their pure culture. There were humans who feared the growing alien presence on Myrinae 7. There were conflicts, misunderstandings, and moments when everything threatened to fall apart. Raiden faced each challenge the way he had been taught, with patience from Minho, with strategy from Laura, with discipline from Jiwo, with compassion from Yuna, with loyalty from Taiyang, with the quiet strength that came from knowing who he was. 1 year after the confrontation with Vector, Raiden received an encrypted message. It was from Shalkora, the war mistress he had defeated. She had been watching, learning, questioning, and now she was ready to change. "I request permission to join your frontier guard," her message said. "I want to learn this human way of strength. I want to understand what you understand." Raiden approved her request immediately. When she arrived, she was different from the warrior who had demanded tribute. She was quieter, more thoughtful, asking questions instead of making demands. "Why did you show me mercy?" she asked one day during training. "Because mercy is not weakness," Raiden said. "It is the choice to be strong in a different way." "I am beginning to understand." More Krithians followed. Not many, but enough. They came in secret, ashamed to admit they questioned the Empire's ways. Each one was welcomed, taught, and given a chance to grow beyond what they had been told they must be. The Empire noticed. Vector, true to his word, had been quietly advocating for change within the military leadership. He faced fierce resistance. Many called him weak, corrupted by his defective offspring. But others, seeing the success of Mirene 7 and the Frontier Guard, began to listen. A message arrived from Vector himself, 2 years after their fight. It was brief. "The Council has agreed to meet with you. They want to see what you have built. Will you come?" Raiden discussed it with his family, the people who had raised him. It was Daiho who spoke the truth they all felt. "This is what we saved you for," he said. "Not just to survive, but to change things. To show a better way." Raiden traveled to the Krithian homeworld aboard Different, accompanied by Taiyang, Bora, Jiwoo, and Yuna. They were escorted by an honor guard of Frontier Guard members representing 10 different species. The Krithian Council was everything Raiden expected. Old, traditional, hostile to change. They sat in judgment, these warriors who had never questioned their ways. Raiden stood before them, small and scarred, representing everything they despised. "You are the defect?" the council leader asked. "The one who survived?" "I am Raiden. I was abandoned as a child. I was raised by humans, and I have built something new. You have corrupted our warriors, weakened them with your self-philosophies. I have shown them that there are many ways to be strong, that cooperation can achieve what domination cannot, that mercy is not weakness, but wisdom." They argued for hours. The council presented case after case of why the Krithian way was superior. Raiden countered each one with examples from Mirene 7, from the Frontier Guard, from the hundreds of lives changed by choosing compassion over cruelty. Finally, the council leader stood. "You speak well, Defect, but words are not proof. Show us. Show us this strength you claim." Raiden smiled. "I already did. I survived when I should have died. I thrived when I should have failed. I built a community when I should have been alone. That is the proof. I am standing here, before you, alive and strong. That is what your way said was impossible." The council was silent. Then, slowly, the leader nodded. "We will observe this experiment of yours. Send us warriors to train at your colony. Let us see if this hybrid strength you speak of is real or just pretty words." It was not acceptance, but it was recognition. And that was enough. Years passed. Mirene 7 grew from a small colony to a thriving city, then to a planet-wide society. The Frontier Guard became a respected force, mediating conflicts and protecting the weak. The hybrid approach, combining the strengths of multiple species, became a model cockpit across human space and beyond. Raiden grew into full adulthood, still smaller than a normal Crithian but no longer caring. He had his own kind of strength, proven through countless challenges. He was respected, feared by some, loved by many. Taiyang remained his closest friend and brother. They had aged together, fought together, built something together. Taiyang eventually married a woman from another colony, and Raiden stood beside him at the wedding. When Taiyang's first child was born, Raiden was named Godfather. The child, a girl named Hana, would grow up in a galaxy that was changing. One where different species worked together more than they fought. Where strength was measured in many ways, not just combat. Where a weak Crithian child raised by humans could change the course of history. One evening, Raiden stood on the observation deck of Mirene 7, now a massive station orbiting the planet below. He was 40 years old, carrying scars from 100 battles and 1,000 lessons. Beside him stood a young Crithian, barely more than a child, newly arrived and terrified. They said I was too small, the child said. That I would never be a true warrior. Raiden smiled. He had heard those words before, in his own mind, in his own fears. Being a true warrior is not about size. It is about courage, wisdom, and choosing to protect rather than destroy. Can you teach me? Yes, but not alone. Come, let me introduce you to your new family. As they walked through the station, passing humans and Crithians and dozens of other species, living and working together, Raiden felt a peace he had never expected to find.